Ukrainian Foreign Minister is now on the line from Kiev. Foreign Minister, I hope you can hear me. Welcome.
I can. I'm happy to be with you.
Thank you very much for taking the time to be with us. So we've already talked about Ukraine's position in this year's Soft Power Index and about the striking way that you have used used social media and fought a battle essentially for the perception of Ukraine beyond the actual battlefield. Tell me about the strategy behind that and when you and the Ukrainian government started to think really hard about how to use all kinds of avenues to project yourselves.
Well, the starting point is definitely 2014, when Russia invaded Ukraine and illegally occupied Crimea, and this invasion was accompanied with enormous propaganda effort. And we realized that we absolutely have no tools to counter that, to spread our narrative around. And to some extent, we significantly lost the war then. And but of course, it prompted us to begin working on building our communications. And since February 2022, what really works are very simple things. We have a powerful story to tell. It's a fight of the good against the evil. We have a strong hero who represents his nation, President Zelensky. And we are pretty skilled in using all available tools of communication. So I don't have to shy away. Yes, we know pretty well how to work in this area, to tell our story, to set our narrative. And the last thing that creates this advantage for us is the most important one. We tell the truth. And truth sells. Sometimes it doesn't, as many media would argue. But when it comes to the war of this scale and of this media exposure, because I think this is probably the most media-covered war even since 20th century. It's when you stand for truth and multiple sources, they reinforce your message because you speak the truth. That really helps to reach out and to penetrate audiences.
Does that mean that this was a strategy that was planned right down to some of those images that we saw from the night that the war began, really? President Zelensky, armed out in the middle of Kiev. I remember that was one of the early videos. President Zelensky's dress, the fact that we've seen him pretty much in battle dress for this entire year. No one's seen him in a suit or anything like that. Did you think it through down to that kind of detail, or was some of that spontaneous?
Listen, when you find yourself at the edge of death, no strategy will work. Even if you had one, it doesn't work. What you begin to do is just to try to survive whatever happens, whatever it takes. And your brain becomes to function in a peculiar way when it faces the risk of extinction. I mean, it's biological stuff that's all communicators understand now. So no, none of us had a wardrobe, a military wardrobe in the back. I started wearing casual. I'm a foreign minister. I know everything about suits, ties, and cufflinks. When the war began, I realized that I don't know how to wear casual stuff. So I had to go to the nearest shop and buy something for me. And the same goes for media. No, the only thing that really came to life between 2014 and 2022 is the understanding that we are fighting against a very strong enemy in the field of information, reputation, and narrative building, narrative construction of narratives. And second, we learned how to use social media to that end. But everything that's happened after February 2022 was rather spontaneous reaction and attempt to survive and win in this struggle. But of course, the more you do, the more more perfect you get. It's very simple. And unfortunately, we have a lot of practice, so we're getting better and better.
There is quite a striking difference in successive polls in the way that you're perceived by European and American citizens, who are strongly in support of helping Ukraine to win the war, and when the citizens, people in India, Turkey, or China, for example, are questioned to the extent that that's possible about their perceptions of Ukraine. They're much more likely to say, if Ukraine ends up ceding territory, so be it. Do you have a strategy to reach people in those countries? Is social media a way that you can try and change those perceptions in countries, in countries where governments are not necessarily on your side?
I have 3 simple rules that I personally try to follow in my communications with what is called Global South, usually. But before I mention them, I want to say one thing. Global South is more nuanced than it might appear. So there is kind of a broad notion, a perception that Global South is against Ukraine, Global South is with Russia, or it's hesitating, it's somewhere in the middle. It's far more nuanced because every country is to some extent an island, and every country is special, and you have to look deep into that country to understand the audience and how to work with it. When I did my Africa tour and saw everything with my own eyes, and I spoke with the people, when I did my visit to Cambodia in Asia for the ASEAN summit and had an opportunity to speak with a lot of people from Asia, in the end, everything I'm trying to communicate to them can be boiled to 3 things. First, you have to speak with them. The more you speak, the more familiar they get with the issue, and the more colorful it gets. It's not just a black spot, something happening over there. Second, you have to speak with a lot of respect. Most of these countries are traumatized with their own history. For them, Europeans messing up among each other, is an issue, because historically they were always paying a price for that. So you have to treat these audiences with a lot of respect and do not take anything for granted. Sometimes you really have to start with an alphabet, to build the story. And finally, what really works is, putting them in our shoes. Basically, when someone tells me that Ukraine could concede a part of the territory in order to stop the bloodshed and end the war and make life easier for everyone, you don't have to go into a lot of politics and historical context and explain why it doesn't work. What really works is just to say, are you ready to concede a square kilometer of your own country to your neighbor, simply because your neighbor decided to take that square kilometer away from you? The answer is always no. As of now, I have not met anyone who would agree to concede his territory to the neighbor. So if it doesn't work with you, why do you think you have the right to advise or to base your argument on this when it comes to us?
We can see, not just from you, but from other members of your government and the Ukrainian people, the will and the determination. But as we go towards the spring and as you look towards the rest of the year, what do you think are going to be the most difficult moments and issues for your country?
The most difficult thing is to set the narrative straight and make it a mainstream narrative that the war is a sequence of battles. You can lose one battle, you can win another battle, but what really matters is that you win the war. And every time we are less successful on the front line, we see the spike in discussions. Okay, maybe it's time to sit down, maybe it's time for Ukraine to make concessions. Oh, they're not capable of doing it, this is not going anywhere. We've heard it, we've been there, we've seen it. I mean, this doesn't work, but there must be a fundamental narrative that Ukraine can win, it will win, and we will do everything what it takes to achieve that as long as it takes. This is the biggest challenge that we have to work on, that support does not get dependent on the state of play on the front line.
But there will be that point, won't there, when we don't know at what point militarily it comes, where you most likely do end up across a negotiating table from the Russians. Is it the case that you want to be the ones who say, yes, we've reached that point, rather than have allies or enemies telling you that this is the time?
Yes, and I think we have achieved that. Because if you listen carefully to the messages coming from our key allies and partners, they all say it will be Ukraine who will decide when to sit down with Russia and on what terms this kind of talks should be based. So we've done that. But this narrative, it can be shaken up by developments on the front line, and also by domestic political developments in respective countries. So that's why I made the point that I made, that we have to ensure that this narrative remains rock solid and consistent, and people base their policy and their decisions on these fundamental points. Ukraine will win, and it will be for Ukraine to decide what victory means.
Okay. And just finally, back to the soft power thought. Do you see your use of soft power, use of social media, as an important way to nudge even allied governments? And I'm thinking particularly of the way that when the whole debate about the tanks was raging and the German government hadn't yet committed, it was quite striking to see how many German citizens were saying, "Free the Leopards, send them to Ukraine."
Absolutely. We all live on social media. I mean,
listen to him.
We may recognize it or not, but both the people and politicians, we are all on social media. This is the statement of fact. And of course, this is why the social media matters so much. And social media is actually a separate battlefield. If you are to seriously fight on that battlefield, then social media is a separate battlefield, because what works on Facebook doesn't work the same way on Instagram, not to mention TikTok and other stuff. Yeah, these things have to be taken absolutely seriously. They are, like in Africa, for example, I asked one politician, do young people still listen to chiefs of tribes they come from? And the response was no, they listen to WhatsApp and Instagram. That's what they listen to. This is what really matters. So when reality reaches that point, of course, you have to treat social media seriously. Unfortunately, social media, especially Meta, they and their product Facebook, I think they still have a lot of space to improve on their standards when it comes to the war of aggression, because many users in Ukraine suffer from being banned by Meta because its standards and protocol allow that. Because their protocol missed one very important point. When there is a war between an aggressor and a victim of the aggressor, these are not two equal sides. There is one bad side in this story, and there is one good side in this story. And the idea, of course, that social media sell to us in their mission statements is that they are always on the side of the good, right? So if you are on the side of the good and not on the side of the evil, then when it comes to a war of aggression, you have to be on the side. You don't have to play neutrality.
Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us.